As I write this video, it's been just over 2 years since the release of Warhammer 40k's 8th edition. Out of the many changes to the rules, hereafter the crunch, and background, hereafter the fluff, that it brought us, the most notorious was the introduction of the Primaris Space Marines. A new breed of warrior 10,000 years in the making, a Superman among supermen come to save the Imperium with a glorious tide of revamped models. If you don't already know what a Primaris Space Marine, or for that matter a normal Space Marine is, this video will probably not enlighten you. There are books you can read and other videos you can watch that will fill in the details. But in short, the Primaris Marine is exactly like the regular Space Marine, except he's bigger, tougher, and slicker looking. Here, see for yourself. The miniature on the left is a Primaris Marine. The other two are Space Marines of different design iterations, the first being from the 2010s and the second being from the mid-1990s. Games Workshop's power-armored Space Marines have an incredibly iconic look to them, and you can see that the Primaris Marines retain that look. Indeed, they retain it so well that they're more iconic than the original icons. It's a beautiful new sculpt, taller, longer-limbed, better proportioned, more true to the in-universe scale. And if Games Workshop would have left it at that, if they'd have just said, "Look, we've made true-scale Space Marines," this video would be over right about now. But that's not what they did. Games Workshop is no piker when it comes to pissing off its longtime fans. They do this in many and varied ways, including invalidating old army lists and canceling old miniature lines. I've been playing Warhammer 40k on and off since the 2nd edition, around 1995, so believe me, I know. However, in 2017, as part of their transition to a kinder, gentler, more fan-friendly company, or perhaps just sensing the tidal wave of outrage that would have swamped them for making their most popular faction obsolete overnight, they hedged. All these wonderful new models were not just a drastically updated look to their miniature line, they said, but a whole new breed of Space Marines. They weren't going to replace your old minis, but instead fight side by side with them. From a marketing point of view, it was a stroke of genius. But from an in-game point of view, it's dumb. And so I say, Primaris Space Marines make no sense, and they will go away soon. Since I make two highly controversial claims here, let me deal with them one at a time. Primaris Space Marines don't make sense. As we've already established, Primaris Space Marines are taller, more massive, tougher Space Marines. According to the fluff, they have a few additional super organs, but that's pretty much it. They wear bigger suits of powered armor, but it's no more resilient. They have bigger bolters and plasma guns, but their profiles are about the same. They're just bigger Space Marines. And this is what doesn't make sense. Being taller and more massive is of no obvious advantage in high-tech combat. In fact, because it gives you a larger target profile and makes it harder to take cover, it is arguably a serious detriment. Sure, if Space Marines fought all their battles at close combat ranges, as if it were the early Middle Ages but with power fists, their added size, strength, and reach would be a significant advantage. But even in Warhammer 40k, which notoriously overemphasizes hand-to-hand combat, most of a battle is fought at long ranges. There are too many snipers and artillery barrages and tanks and strafing aircraft to get any payoff from being bigger and stronger than the already superhumanly tall and strong Space Marines. Now, there are a couple of second-order consequences to greater size and strength that would make them useful on a high-tech battlefield, namely the ability to carry heavier weapons and greater damage capacity. But, as I already mentioned, the Primaris Marines really don't seem to carry heavier weapons. Physically larger ones, sure, but not noticeably superior in terms of firepower. The Intercessor squads are armed with bolt rifles, which in game terms are just standard bolters with a marginally longer range. The Hellblasters have plasma guns which, if I recall correctly, are less likely to explode at low power than normal plasma guns, but otherwise have a very similar profile. Primaris Marines are not walking around with heavy bolters, heavy plasmas, las cannons, or assault cannons as personal long arms. Interestingly, the one exception to this are the Inceptors, who carry a brace of compact heavy bolters that they wield as pistols. But Inceptors are the close combat assault troops, so this is a sort of admission that they're not too worried about the advantages provided by greater size and strength in hand-to-hand combat. In fact, Primaris Marine formations actually carry fewer heavier weapons than traditional Space Marines. They lack an equivalent to Devastator squads entirely, and their tactical squad equivalents, the Intercessors, don't have the option of equipping a heavy weapon. Clearly, they are not taking advantage of their larger size to carry more powerful weapons. As for higher damage capacity, Primaris Marines do have an additional wound compared to a normal Space Marine, theoretically making them twice as difficult to kill. I emphasize the word theoretically because if they're hit with a blast weapon or a burst of fire that deals multiple wounds, it often doesn't make that much of a difference. And since regular Space Marine character models typically have even more wounds than Primaris Marines, it's clear that greater size and mass isn't the only thing that adds longevity on the battlefields of the 41st millennium. But in the interest of giving the Primaris Marines the greatest possible benefit of the doubt, we'll chalk up their greater resilience to their larger size and call it a win for the brilliance of Belisarius' call. Unfortunately, that advantage isn't enough to make the Primaris a significant improvement over normal Space Marines, because they have a downside that we haven't brought up yet. And that downside is arguably the single most important factor in warfare: logistics. According to the Crunch, Primaris Marines cannot fit in rhinos or razorbacks, the common transports of the Space Marine forces. They cannot ride bikes or land speeders, pilot storm talons, or crew predators or whirlwinds. They cannot deploy from orbit in standard drop pods or even in the cavernous holds of Thunderhawk gunships. Their blown up, mashed to pieces, barely alive corpses cannot even pilot regular dreadnoughts. Until the 2019 edition of Codex Space Marines comes out, the only thing that they can ride in officially is a repulsor tank, a tank designed specifically for the Primaris' greater size. Even the Land Raider, designed to carry Terminators, is allegedly too small to carry the Primaris. If you believe that GW's Crunch is an accurate representation of the fluff, of the internal reality of their fictional universe, then you must also believe that the Primaris Space Marines have imposed a crippling logistical burden on the Legiones Astartes. Far from being the cavalry come to the rescue at the Imperium's darkest hour, the requirement for whole classes of massive, new, non-standard transports would have paralyzed the once highly mobile Space Marine formations. And that is why Primaris Marines don't make sense, at least in the context of the fictional universe. Why Primaris Marines are going away soon. There is, however, a different context in which they make perfect sense: the meta-context of Games Workshop's future plans for miniature making. Look again at this lineup of Space Marines. If you look beyond the enormous size difference between the Primaris Marine and his most recent equivalent, you'll notice that the Deathwatch Marine from the 2010s is slightly but noticeably larger than the pewter Beaky from the late 90s. My even older 1994-95 Blood Angels Death Company Marines look like overgrown ratlings in comparison to the Deathwatch Marine. But this is not just Games Workshop, folks. If you have any 15mm soldiers in your collection, compare modern ones with those from the 1990s. Hell, even from the early 2000s. Look at the Star Wars Legion miniatures compared to the Star Wars Rebel Assault miniatures. Practically every miniature company is making their minis bigger as time goes on. Whether this is a good thing or a contemptuous thumbing of the nose to wargaming grognards is a topic for another video, but it's a fact that we have to live with. And that is why the Primaris Marines are going away. Not the models, no, they're here for the long haul. But the concept of the Primaris will, probably by the next edition of 40K, go away. The canon will change so that there were never any Primaris Marines, but only ever one bog standard type of Space Marine, and he will always have been 9 feet tall. Games Workshop will phase out production of their old Marine miniatures until there are no anomalously smaller Space Marine models in stores to threaten their revisionist narrative, and new players will be none the wiser. We are at war with Eurasia and have always been at war with Eurasia. If you doubt this, ask yourself why there are no Primaris-only named special characters. The fact that they haven't created, at least in model form, a Primaris character, but instead have converted Grand Old Man Marnus Calgar into a new Primaris form, and soon will have also done so with Chief Librarian Tigurius and Corsaro Khan, speaks volumes. It won't end with those three either. There will be a Primaris converted Dante and a Logan Grimnar. Hell, maybe even a Pedro Cantor and Ragnar Blackmane. Azrael and Ezekiel will also become Primaris, and any talk of their fratricide against their Primaris reinforcements will be retconned. Games Workshop has altered the canon many times before, and they will do so again. And I predict this retcon will be complete within 2 to 3 years. So what do you think? Are the Primaris here to stay? Is there something I overlooked that makes them worthwhile in combat? Let me know in the comments. And please like and reshare this video. While you're at it, subscribe to my channel so that you can come back in a few days and see part 2. How to make Primaris Space Marines make sense in your own Warhammer 40K canon. Oh, and hey, if you share my enthusiasm for excessively detailed analysis of fictional worlds and the overwhelming desire to make the fantastic believable and internally consistent, you'll love my heroic adventure novels. Fans of military science fiction in particular will want to read my award-winning short story, House of Refuge. Links below in the description. This is Attention Span Labs, signing off. Whoa! What is this creature next to the Imperial Guard Kazarkin? Is it a ratling of unusual size? A miniature by some lesser benighted manufacturer outside of the game's workshop hobby? No! It's a rogue trader-era Imperial Guardsman. And who is this oddly familiar-looking mechanical dwarf between the Skitarii Ranger and the Tartaros Pattern Terminator? A rare Mechanicum robot? A squat in exo-armor? No! It's a 1990s era pewter Terminator. Extrapolating from current growth patterns, by the year 2100, a standard 28mm scale miniature will be 4 times the size of an adult human man, and only the 5 richest princes of Europe will be able to afford one.